If you have a Bible, will you meet me in Matthew chapter number 8? I'm really excited to preach this message this weekend as we continue in our series, We Are Hope Baltimore. And we are talking about or preaching through our values as a faith community. And so before we get to Matthew chapter number 8, I was thinking about one of the highlights of my life when I was in, I believe it was maybe my late 20s or maybe in my early 30s. I attended the NFL Hall of Fame induction ceremony for one of my teammates. I had an opportunity to spend a short time in the National Football League, and I had the opportunity also in that short time to play with 5 Hall of Famers. And when I got to Canton, Ohio, which is where the Hall of Fame is, I was fascinated by all of these names that I had heard of. And you can walk these halls and you can see the busts, the faces of these men, these great men that have played this game. I also have to just put a side note here and an asterisk that although it was one of my greatest highlights in my life, it comes with an asterisk because my wife gave me the business for not taking her. So I should, and she's nodding her head there. So I just felt like as a good husband, I should acknowledge that in this moment so we don't have to talk about it later. But it was fascinating to be a part of this Hall of Fame induction. And we know that in every field of human endeavor, whether it's entertainment or whether it's medicine or education, there are all of these kind of Hall of Fame type accolades and things that we know about. I mean, things like in LA or in Hollywood, you have the Walk of Fame. People have stars on the Walk of Fame, and then you have the Nobel Peace Prize. We've heard of that. We've heard of in the military, Purple Hearts being given out for bravery, and even those of us who are in medicine or are familiar with the medical field, maybe you've heard of the Shaw Prize, which is having to do with those who have high achievements in biomedicine. We even know about giving honors to our kids or our kids receiving honors. Things like when they're in school, like perfect attendance, or even if they play a sport, successful participation trophies, right? All the way up to things like being a valedictorian. We understand and we have received these honors. But as I processed all of this and I processed this idea of honor and what it means to honor, which is what we're talking about this weekend, I thought about how, for the most part, honor in our culture and in our context seems to be most synonymous with achievement. It seems to be most synonymous with things that we accumulate over our time. And the metrics of our culture are all about degrees and what you have accomplished over your life. And our culture measures honor by who gets it and who does not get it based upon these accomplishments. It's largely what you've done, or if you have proximity or relationship to important people. Now, I'm not talking about how we give banter and we maybe sometimes seemingly dishonor our friends because of things that they have chosen and that is going on in their life. Those things are fun. Like if you're in Baltimore and you're wearing Steelers gear, you're going to get it because this is Ravens country, and that oh, somebody's clapping. Okay. John is a huge Baltimore Ravens fan. But even things like where you grow up. Now, I grew up in the South, and I love grits. And so I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't like grits or you put sugar on your grits. Now listen, now I know that's a little bit of a thing. That's not how I roll, but listen, I might banter you and I might maybe push you or push against that, but that's not dishonor. I'm just saying that you got it wrong. But I'm talking about how we esteem one another. And I'm also not saying that accomplishments and achievements and honor is bad. It's nothing wrong with those things. And it's nothing wrong with being proud of the things that we have accomplished. The problem is when we apply worth to ourselves and others because of it. The problem is then when we think that we're better because of a degree or because of a zip code or because of some sort of validation that the culture has given us. And it's an even bigger problem when we look down upon a person or a person's personhood is seen as less because they don't have what we have or they're not at a certain point in their life. It's hard for us to say that we love everyone when we only show love and honor to the people we love or we like or we think are like us. And I have to just pause right here because unfortunately, the saddest indictment of people who do that is sometimes pointed in the direction of the church. And here's the thing. People are not necessarily leaving the church because they no longer believe. Many people are leaving the church because they don't think the church believes what it preaches, or at least displays or shows that to one another. And when we think about what Jesus told us and what he said in the great commandment, which is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, Jesus was just talking about honor. Honor God and honor his people. That's it. There's no prerequisites of faith. There's no prerequisites of politics, of sexuality, of ethnicity, of class, of achievements. Just honor God and one another. And I love the fact that Jesus didn't just say this, he showed us this throughout the Gospels. And I want to just highlight a couple of my favorite examples this weekend as we fast forward to Matthew chapter 8. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus, he engaged with the least and the greatest. And it caused a lot of confusion because Jesus literally, as we talked about last week, was just a disruptor. He was hanging with people that people thought he shouldn't hang with. He was going to dinner with folks that people hated. It was confusing how this man is a king and he has no entourage. As a matter of fact, he has these 12 guys, these ragtag group of guys who are following him, who are his disciples. And it's weird that he is this king, but he has no army. He has no swag. He has no external indicators that he is who he says he is. You know, it's kind of like one of my favorite movies, The Karate Kid. It's like Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi is supposed to be a sensei, but he has no gym he's affiliated with. He doesn't even wear a uniform, but yet he's got Daniel out waxing a car to teach him karate. It just seems weird and it just seems out of place. But Jesus is showing us something here in everything that he does. And part of what he's showing us is that we don't need cultural validation to honor or have authority to have impact. You don't need a position. You don't need a title. You don't need extraordinary gifts to show honor and to have impact on society. Even though the metrics in our culture say different, the metrics in God's kingdom is way different. That's why it was called the upside down kingdom. When Jesus came on the scene, they're like, yo, I don't know what's up with this dude. Everything he's saying is just off because it was opposite of what the culture thought it meant to honor, to be someone important, or any of these things that they had put in place. And so Matthew 8 is an example of how Jesus demonstrates to us how we are to honor. And let's go there, starting at verse 1, Matthew chapter number 8. We'll read verse 1 through 3, and then we'll skip over to verse 5 through 10, and then read or I'll mention verse 13. Here we go. This is Jesus, when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. Right away, a man with leprosy came up and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Reaching out his hand, Jesus touched him, saying, "I am willing, be made clean." Immediately, his leprosy was cleansed. We skip down to verse number 5. When he entered, this is Jesus again, when he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible agony." He said to him, "Am I to come and heal him?" "Lord," the centurion replied, "I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am too a man under authority, having soldiers under my command. I say to this one, go, and he goes, and another come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." Hearing this, Jesus was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with so great a faith." I want to just tag this message this weekend, just a simple subject: giving honor. This is one of my favorite passages of scripture, and in verses 1 through 3, it's my favorite miracle of Jesus, because it speaks to the compassion that Jesus has and the humility in which he walked in. And it speaks to the most basic need of humanity, and that is to be loved and valued. No matter who you are, everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be valued. It doesn't matter what your circumstance or your situation is, your family name. You just want somebody to love you and value you. But contextually, we need to understand the significance of these two short stories that we just read. First, we have this leper. Well, what is a leper? A leper was someone who was an outcast in society because they had skin diseases. And some of the skin diseases were highly contagious. You could see them. Sometimes, people had like pus and different things. It was just not really cool. Like it was bad. And so these people were outcasts, and guess what? They could not even live amongst other people. They could only live amongst lepers, and they had to live outside of the city. Can you imagine having a condition that would disconnect you from your family, from your friends, and you could never see them or be with them the way that you want just because you had this condition? These people were outcasts. And I love the fact that even though they were outcasts, that this man who is a leper, he's breaking protocol to beg Jesus to heal him, because he's breaking protocol because you were not supposed to interface with people who were not lepers, and you had to announce wherever you went, "Unclean, unclean." Can you imagine walking amongst people announcing to them your circumstance or your situation? Can you imagine having? That's horrible. That had to be a tremendous weight. And anyone who touched these people, they were considered unclean themselves and had to go through a process to be clean. So it was just easy to just be away from them. The second man, the centurion, he's a commanding officer. And I mentioned this last week. Centurions represented Roman occupation. All right. They were a colonial authority. So Rome was known as a great empire that was conquering different lands. And so they would put these centurions in place to make sure they maintained order and that there was authority from Rome in these places that they had conquered. So you can imagine that these weren't very popular people. Nobody really loved them. And this man was also a Gentile. He was not a Jew. Okay, so he has two strikes against him. Yet this man who is in authority, he begs Jesus, not on behalf of himself, on behalf of one of his men, of one of his soldiers, which is an act of humility itself. So we have this leper and this centurion that are on polar opposites of the culture, yet how Jesus engages with them shows us a couple of things. And if you're taking notes, this is just my main point for today, and everything that I say is just an umbrella under this point. And here it is: honor does not belong to those with status or our preferences. Honor does not belong to only those who have status or the preferences that we're cool with. Oh, you're a Democrat, I'm cool with that. Oh, you're a Republican, oh, I'm cool with that. Oh, you went to this school, oh, I'm cool with that. Oh, you have this degree, oh, you're a part of this group. No, it doesn't belong to our preferences or the people who have status. And the Bible has a lot to say about favoritism and preferential treatment, which is called discrimination, y'all. Jesus demonstrates honor and loving the outcast, the fringe, and the despised. And there were several examples. People like Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. Nobody liked tax collectors. I don't know that we even still like tax collectors. The Samaritan woman, like it was against the law for a man to or a woman to address a man or a man to address a woman in a certain way in public, let alone a Samaritan, which was considered to be a half-breed. Those are not people that we are even cool with. And Jesus is talking to this woman. And then even the disciples, this ragtag group of folks who Jesus called to come follow him, who eventually helped change the world. And these were not people that you would pick to do anything, but Jesus picked them. So what is Jesus saying? This is the question. What is Jesus saying to us in Matthew 8 with these two encounters with these men? What is he saying to us? I'm so glad you asked. Thank you guys for being so engaged and asking. The first thing I think Jesus is saying is we must see the unseen. We must see the unseen. I love this miracle so much because, listen, the leper, he's not even given a name. We just only know his condition. This is part of the reason why we engage with our street friends and we call them friends and we don't call them homeless people. Because we're not trying to acknowledge them or just only know them by their condition. We want to get to know them. So we call them friends. How often are we seeing people and only relegating them to their condition? Jesus understands that this man is somebody, but even he himself has come to grips with the fact that he is nobody. He understands he is nobody. And how do we know? Because when we look at his request is one of low expectation. Yes, he wants Jesus to heal him, but he even gives Jesus an out. He doesn't even ask him directly to heal him. He said, Jesus, if you're willing. You know why? Because he's used to being rejected. He's used to people looking down upon him. He's used to being an outcast. So he gives Jesus an out and said, you don't even have to if you don't want to. But if you're willing, will you heal me? Can you make me clean? And I love the fact, I love this. Jesus touches the man first. He doesn't just say, be clean. He touches him first. He's the Son of God. He doesn't have to touch him to make him clean, but he touches him because he knows what the man really needs is a touch. Because no one touches lepers. No one hangs with them, spends time with them. And so Jesus understood that his humanity needed to be touched. He's saying to this man, your condition is not a barrier for my care. The question for us is, are we willing as Jesus followers to touch the untouchable? Are we willing to engage them? Are we willing to be vulnerable with them? Are we willing to see the unseen? Which causes us to step outside of our comfort zone and engage. Because Jesus was on his way somewhere else. But he stopped to engage this man and touch him. And immediately he was healed. The second thing I think that these two stories is telling us, first is to see the unseen. The second is, don't cancel your perceived enemy. I knew I wasn't going to get no amens right there. Because we are living in a cancel culture right now. If someone doesn't like what we like or says something that we don't like or they voted the way that we don't like, they are canceled. We are a ball them up, throw them away society. And it's not just the people who have conditions that are different than us. It's the people who don't think like us, who don't do things like we do, and we cancel them and throw them away. I think Jesus, in this interaction with this centurion, is saying, don't cancel your perceived enemy, because people didn't like centurions. They represented Roman occupation. They were a visual representation that you are under the authority of Rome now. And in many ways, Jesus himself, think about this, he is a threat to Rome himself, just with his following and the people who are spreading word about the things that he is. He could be a perceived and was a perceived threat. Yet the man one of the men that's put in these colonies to make sure that the threats are thwarted recognizes that Jesus isn't a threat. He is someone that I need to engage. And it says that he humbled himself. As a person of power, of influence, and authority, he recognizes that even with his power, his authority, and his influence, he can't save his servant. But this man, Jesus, might be able to. So he humbles himself and he begs Jesus to heal his servant. Now, Jesus could have rejected him and said, listen, I would do that, but I don't really get down with this Roman occupation and how y'all are treating, and just all that's going on with Rome, because actually, like, I'm the one that's representing the only kingdom that matters. He could have rejected him. He could have dissed him in that way, but he didn't. It's a fascinating exchange that Jesus then has with him, because then Jesus asked him a question. Well, then should I come to your house then and heal this man? And the centurion said, no, Jesus, because I know what authority looks like. All you got to do is say the word. Now, let's put a pin right here. Previously, he touches the leper. He doesn't have to, because he just says the word. But he knows that the leper needs to touch. Now he could go to the centurion's house, but the centurion says, no, listen, I know how authority works. You just say the word and it can be. And Jesus responds and says, I've never seen such faith like this in all of the land. Now, do you know how crazy that is? Because this is a Gentile who is not a Jew, and he's saying that of all of the religious people and the religious authority that is represented, it's this man who is an enemy that is largely canceled because of the kingdom that he's a part of and what he represents. This is the man that he has faith like I've never seen before. This is why we've got to be careful who we're trying to cancel. because we don't know what God is doing or wants to do in and through them. Jesus honors this man and honors his faith and heals his servant. My question to you is does how we honor, engage one another, does it get Jesus's attention to say, wow, I have not seen such faith in this manner? Is what we're doing worthy of Jesus's attention? Because the culture says, cancel. But Jesus says, have compassion. It's easy to cancel. It's difficult to have compassion. Especially with, I'm just keeping it real. Maybe it's just me. I know I'm a pastor, but listen, I still have struggled with having compassion for people who I just think don't get it, who have problems, who need prayer. You know, sometimes that's code for you're crazy. But Jesus said, have compassion. Let me see if I can land the plane for us like this, and we can be on our way. And John can go check out the Ravens. Speaking of honor, I just want to share a personal story to close this weekend. I spent some time in Atlanta this weekend, just gathering with a bunch of pastors around the country who are passionate about building churches for the unchurched, the de-churched, people who ordinarily wouldn't come to church. And it was just a great gathering. I was having an amazing time, and I got a text from my wife who said, call me. And, you know, I didn't really think much of it. So I finished doing what I was doing, and I just said, give me a few minutes. And so I called her, and she shared with me that an intern that I had from my previous church, National Community Church, 39 years old, had died. And very, very tragic just situation, just because, you know, of his age, being so young, having a family. And it was heartbreaking. And I was having a conversation on Friday night. I had gotten back, and I was having a conversation on Friday with another guy who I worked with, and we knew this young man. His name is Matthew Gillette, and Matthew. I mean, listen, y'all. There's nothing noteworthy in terms of like just charisma or anything. Matthew could be in a room 100 days out of 100 and you wouldn't recognize him. He wouldn't stand out in any way. He was just one of those kind of folks. But I was so encouraged when I was talking with my friend who shared with me that this week, upon hearing upon Matthew's death, Matthew was being honored, and there were people in the city of Alexandria, Virginia, including the mayor, who was saying how great Matthew Gillette was. They were saying that here is a man who was present. Here was a man who was invested in this community. Here is a man who understood what it meant to show up. Here was a man who honored the least and a man who honored the greatest among equally. And I remember after, or coming towards the end of Matthew's internship, he told me, he said, Pastor Joshua, he said, I'm just going to move to Alexandria City, because we were living in Alexandria in the Fairfax County side. But he said, I'm going to move to Alexandria City with my wife because I just want to pour myself out to the city. 39 years of life, and Matthew accomplished what God wanted him to accomplish. And he was a man who showed honor. And I believe that what Matthew did got God's attention. and got the people's attention in the city of Alexandria. Can it be said about us when we show up that when we are gone, we would be missed in the same way? Can it be said that because of how we honored and because of how we invested and because of how we engaged, that here is an example of what it means to follow Jesus? And even if people don't know Jesus and can't make the association, can they say this was a person of impact? Not because of our degree, not because of our station in life, not because of any accomplishment, but because of how we engaged and how we invested. The last thing I'll say as we close is, you can argue that Jesus is not the Son of God, if you'd like. You can argue that he is not the deity. He was just a prophet. He was just a man. You can honor all of those things. But what you can't discredit is the impact that Jesus had on the world. There's no other figure ever that has had the impact on culture like Jesus. And it's a historical fact. And so if that is the case, as disciples of Jesus, are we having an impact in our neighborhoods, on our jobs, in our communities? Or are we just content with putting a label on ourselves that says we're Christian and going about our day? We are called to give honor. And so if the question is asked, who or what is Hope Baltimore about? I hope it would be said that this is a faith community that honors, that shows up, that invests to the least and to the greatest equally.